So picture this, it's 1974. The world's economy is, well, it's a mess. Inflation is out of control and all the old economic playbooks seem totally useless. And right in the middle of all this chaos, the Nobel Prize in Economics goes to someone who isn't just tweaking the system. Now, it goes to one of its biggest, most consistent critics.
And those are the exact words Friedrich Hayek used when he accepted his prize. Think about that. It's not a victory lap. It's not him saying, see, I was right all along. It's a statement about humility. And that one idea, humility, is actually the key to unlocking why his work was such a game changer. See, for decades, the big idea was that governments should be in the driver's seat of the economy. But what really made people's heads spin was who Hayek shared the prize with, a guy named Gunnar Myrdal. Now, Myrdal was a socialist, one of the main minds behind Sweden's welfare state. Hayek's complete ideological opposite. So by giving the prize to both of them, the Nobel Committee was doing something really interesting. They weren't picking a winner. They were saying the debate itself was what mattered.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to dig into why his win was such a shocker. Then we'll tackle his big theory on booms and busts. After that, we'll get into his most famous idea, the knowledge problem. We'll see how that connects to freedom, and then we'll wrap it all up by looking at why Hayek's ideas are still so important today. Okay, let's get right into it. The big question is, in a world where everyone believed in government intervention, why on earth give the top prize to a guy who spent his entire career warning against that very thing? What were these ideas that were so powerful?
Well, one of his biggest ideas tackled the exact problem that was crushing the world back in the 70s, these crazy, unpredictable cycles of economic booms and busts. But here's the thing. He wasn't just describing what was happening. He had a pretty radical theory for why it was happening.
This all comes down to what's called the Austrian business cycle theory. And the core idea is pretty wild. Hayek said that recessions, they aren't just bad luck. They aren't random. They're actually the totally predictable and very painful hangover you get after an artificial party, a boom, thrown by central banks.
Okay, so let's break that down. Here's how it works. Step 1. A central bank makes it super cheap to borrow money. This sends a totally wrong signal to businesses. They think, wow, money is cheap. Let's build big, long-term stuff. Hayek called these malinvestments because they're not based on what people are actually saving. So you get this big, artificial boom. But it's a house of cards. Eventually, reality kicks in. It turns out the resources for all these projects aren't really there, prices start to rise, the projects fall apart, and that whole boom comes crashing down into a bust.
So this whole idea that a central authority can send out these false signals that mess up the entire economy, it leads us straight to Hayek's biggest, most important idea. And honestly, this is where he completely changed how we think about economics. It's all about knowledge. I mean, just stop and think about it for a second. How does your favorite coffee shop get the exact right amount of beans every single morning? Who's telling farmers what to plant or tech companies what gadgets to invent? The complexity is absolutely mind-boggling. And you might think, well, someone's got to be in charge, right? But Hayek's whole point was that this assumption is completely, fundamentally wrong. And this is the heart of his argument right here. A central planner would have to somehow gather an insane amount of data. And we're not just talking about spreadsheets. We're talking about local knowledge, gut feelings, the kind of stuff a farmer knows about his land that you can't put on a report. And even if they could get all that info, it'd be out of date the second they got it. But the market doesn't need a boss. It has its own kind of supercomputer that processes all this information instantly. And that supercomputer is the price system. Think of prices as signals. When the price of something goes up, it's screaming to thousands of companies, hey, make more of this stuff. And at the same exact time, it's telling millions of us, whoa, maybe use a little less of that. It's this incredible decentralized communication network. It coordinates billions of decisions every day, and nobody has to be in charge giving orders. And that's the bottom line, that local, on-the-ground knowledge can never, ever be bottled up and sent to some central office. Now, for Hayek, this stuff about knowledge wasn't just some abstract academic theory. He saw a massive warning in it, a warning about politics and freedom. And that brings us to his most famous, and maybe most controversial book, The Road to Serfdom. And his argument here was both incredibly simple and, frankly, chilling. He said that when you try to centrally plan an economy, even if you have the best intentions in the world, you start society down a very dangerous path. It's not just that it won't work well,
It's that it will eventually destroy the very foundations of freedom.
So why does that happen? Well, think about it. To have a single economic plan for a whole country, you need to agree on a single set of goals. But in a free society, you and I and everyone else have millions of different goals. So to force one plan on everyone, the government has to start overriding our choices. It has to decide what's important, who gets what jobs you can have. And little by little, what starts as economic control turns into control over, well, everything.
And this powerful warning, this idea about the danger of planners, really brings us to Hayek's lasting legacy. Because it's not just about one theory or another. It's about a fundamental mindset, a whole different way of looking at society. It all comes back to that word from the beginning, humility.
See, Hayek said that many economists had fallen into a trap he called scientism. They were trying to treat the economy like it was a machine, something you could just tinker with, predict, and engineer like you're building a car. But an economy isn't a machine. It's more like a living, breathing ecosystem, a complex, constantly changing web of human decisions, fueled by knowledge that no one person could ever possibly understand.
And this quote just nails his entire philosophy. He believed the job of an economist wasn't to be some genius architect designing society from the top down. No, their job was to be a humble student of society, to try and understand how this incredible, spontaneous order emerges. And, most importantly, to constantly remind the people in power just how little they actually know. So if we boil all of Hayek's Nobel-winning ideas down, what are we left with? 4 huge takeaways. 1. Prices aren't just costs, they're information. 2. Central planning is destined to fail because no one can ever know enough. 3. The most important tool for any economist should be humility. And 4. Economic freedom and personal freedom, they're 2 sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other.